Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Qualified Immunity. Today, we are going to talk about something very, very touchy. Very touchy. We're going to talk about human trafficking, which I believe is the most unspoken crime in the entire world.
Is this the trigger warning?
This is the best trigger warning I'm going to give. Because we've hinted around it a couple times, and it's time we do an entire episode on it. Because between things like Epstein that have happened and things related to it, this is the official trigger warning for this episode. Because this is going to get very deep, this is going to get very complicated, and him as my witness, Lucas is my witness. I said before this started, there is no time limit to this episode. We're going to go deep, we're going to go hard, we're going to go fast, and at the very end of it, we're going to have a slight announcement. With that being said, what a lot of people don't know about my career is that for what? I focused on this very issue for a while. And I have seen the victims in person, I've seen them up close, and what most people think when they think of human trafficking and sex trafficking, excuse me, is not taken. It's not, it got over dramatized and over Hollywoodized by that particular movie series, etc. That being said, this is a very serious issue. This is an issue that I have taken to heart. This is an issue that I will spend the rest of my life combating in one form or the other. Because the libertarian side of me comes out of this a lot of it and says consent is key. Consent in everything is key. And what is happening among runaways, among drug addicts, among people sold into it, there's so many different ways that people get funneled into the pipeline of human trafficking and sex trafficking. And we're going to talk about the other side of human trafficking too, because there is another side of human trafficking and labor trafficking. And there's a lot of people that don't talk about it. And once you get into that side of it, fake visas, fake passports, fake, or even legitimate visas and passports, legitimate worker clearances, and they come in and they take their passport. This is a whole metric that we're going to talk about today. But the majority of human trafficking, I say the majority of recorded human trafficking ends up being sex trafficking. So, with that being said, that is your 4-minute trigger warning. Because this is going to get deep, it's going to get deep, it's going to get deep fast. You ready?
I think so.
To understand trafficking, you have to understand one thing and one thing very specifically. Sex sells. Sex has sold for the entire history of humanity, and that's not going to change today. It's not going to change tomorrow. And trafficking has been a problem for the entirety of humanity. And this becomes the issue we face today in the 21st century in 2020, where how do we stop with the technology that we have the oldest crime in history? and the crime that does not get talked about, the crime that does not get published very often, the crime that's not on the front page. Like, the Department of Homeland Security has a blue campaign that is entirely about human trafficking. And at one point, I don't remember their exact term, an ambassador. Like, I have so many human trafficking. I have tons of human trafficking material. And I went to gas stations trying to put up, like, getting permission to put up posters about human trafficking and, hey, this is the hotline, this is how you can get out, this is et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of gas stations wouldn't even let it get it put up because they didn't want to scare their customers.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the problem becomes, by attempting to not scare your customers, what you're actually doing is ignoring the problem.
Yeah.
And the problem becomes, and we went down this rabbit hole a couple episodes ago about there's an entire movement right now to make pedophilia normal. Minor attracted?
Oh, minor attracted person.
Yeah, MAP, minor attracted persons. So we have an entire issue in this world of going, what do we do now? How do we fix this? And understand how you fix it. And I am a massive proponent. If you do not understand history, you're doomed to repeat it. And the problem becomes, in history, we have to understand that the one thing that has controlled the world, even back to biblical times, why did Samson cut his hair?
Lady.
Mm-hmm.
Lady friend.
Why do a lot of people refuse to name their children Delilah? I mean, I think it's actually a pretty name. But now you've come to a moment in time where trafficking is an issue. And we have more trafficked humans on the face of the earth right now because we've never been more interconnected in the history, at least in the recorded history of man. You can get on a plane right now from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and fly to Tokyo.
In less than a day.
In less than a day. You'll be, I mean, outside of the international date line, you will be there in the same 24 hours.
Yeah.
Same with London. Same with Paris. Like, I'm not sure if you can do it to Moscow, and Moscow is literally the other side of the world.
And you can communicate with any of those places in seconds.
Seconds. 100% seconds. So we now have an issue of going, and somebody made a TikTok, and it went pretty viral, about we have a bunch of homeless veterans. We have two problems in the world. A sex trafficking ring run by rich. I hate the term I hate the pedo term. I don't know why, because the more we say pedophile, the more it becomes normal.
Yeah.
Like 10, 15 years ago, if you say pedophile, it was a bad thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it still is, but it was taking a totally different term than how it is now.
Yeah. Well, wow, I didn't ever think about that. 10 or 15 years ago, it was literally a taboo. I mean, it fit all the qualifiers of a taboo. I mean,
yeah.
You just didn't talk about that.
And this becomes the sad part too, is 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago especially, a woman wanting to marry a woman and a man wanting to marry a man inadvertently got taken back to, well, then they're going to adopt children. They're just a bunch of pedophiles.
Right.
Which I don't believe for one instance. I know some gay parents and I know some lesbian parents that are way better parents than some of the straight parents I know. So get bent with your bigotry and get the fuck out to the front door. Because I'm sorry, your what you prefer, your sexual orientation does not determine what kind of parent you're going to be.
Right.
With that being said, if you are a minor attracted person, I'm going to probably say you shouldn't be a parent.
Yeah.
Like, But I have seen human trafficking. I have met victims. I've seen victims in the raw. I have seen victims after therapy. I've seen victims years later. And the problem becomes you're never gonna just get over it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people that do not want this to become an issue.
Yeah.
And the reason they don't want it to become an issue is because they condone. Actually, this is an old no holds barred episode. They condone it. There's a lot of people in power. They're like, oh, well, she's just a hooker.
Yeah.
You don't know what goes on behind those closed doors. You don't know what's being done. You don't know where she's from. You don't know, like, the 3 elements of the crime on a federal level of human trafficking is force, fear, or coercion.
Mm. Well, and the other thing that I've always heard is, well, they're free to leave anytime.
No, they're not. No, not even close.
Well, even if you're willing to make that argument, in a lot of cases they can't. At least from what I understand.
You can get out of, and most people know this. Like, it's you get jumped into a gang and you get jumped out of a gang. And if you ever decide to leave the gang, you'll be lucky to leave it alive.
Yeah.
Now, are there people who have done it? Yes, there are. However, with trafficking and trafficking victims, especially sex trafficking, and you have to understand the history of this, a lot of, I don't want to use a blanket term like cartels, but a lot of things like cartels that have been shoveling drugs across the border for decades and decades, and drug dealers who've been shoving drugs and peddling drugs, and granted, I'm the most libertarian person that's ever been a cop that's going to look up and go, drugs should just be legal, and we should stop, just stop. But what we've come to is a moment in time of they figured out once you snort that line of coke, it's gone.
Yeah.
Humans are not the same way, and sex will sell faster than drugs will.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're selling drugs, and I could bring on a handful of cops right now that would back this up. If you get a drug addict and you pull them over and you get in their car, the hypersexuality of drug addicts is mind-boggling. Like, it is legitimately mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And used to be, we looked up and we're like, oh, well, we got to worry about our kids when they're 13, 14, once they hit puberty and this and that and this. And no, you don't. You got to worry about them from the time they're born.
Yeah. And
it is becoming more and more evident, more and more clear every day that there are people out there in this world who, minor attracted persons, pedophiles, monsters, who are sexually attracted from the day they're born.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the father of a 2.5-year-old girl and a 1-year-old boy, and I worry about taking them into Walmart because I know it's very possible, especially if we ever move to an actual major city, it's very possible that I could walk by somebody who is sexually attracted to my 2.5-year-old daughter or is sexually attracted to my 1-year-old boy, and nothing's being done about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in Oklahoma, we had a state senator solicit, what was it, a 16 or 17-year-old boy for sex?
Yeah, I think it was a 17-year-old.
And how many times in Oklahoma, just Oklahoma alone, and this, like, we're not including major states, how many times in Oklahoma alone have we had, a teacher sleeping with, and I'm not even putting gender on this.
Yeah.
A teacher sleeping, a 21, 22-year-old teacher sleeping with an 18, 17-year-old student, or hell, how many times have we had a 41-year-old sleeping with a 17-year-old? Like, yeah. And 17, the actual age of consent in Oklahoma is 16. Mm-hmm. It's 14 under certain parameters, but the actual age of consent in Oklahoma is 16, without parental consent, et cetera, et cetera. But now we get to this point of going, we legitimately, in American society, and I would argue the entire world, have a pedophilia problem. We have a human trafficking problem, and they are combining, and it is a toxic relationship. Because if you've ever been to Las Vegas, and I mean, you've been to Vegas, I've been to Vegas. If you ever walked down the strip, how many people are, and I should have like grabbed another card. How many people are walking by going,
yeah,
with the cards, and they hand you a handful of cards, and it's a 2-girl, 3-girl special, yada 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 yada. Call this number, etc. If you actually believe, and there might be a percentage, I'm going to say it's less than 3%, but if you actually believe that the infrastructure is set up and the logistics is set up that somebody is down there on the Las Vegas Strip, one of the most expensive places in the entire world, but somebody's down there on the Strip handing out cards to hire you for a 2-girl or 3-girl special with nudes of you on it, and you're an independent contractor, like, the facts don't match up to anybody that has common sense.
Right.
But, and this becomes the entire argument behind legalizing sex work, professional sex work. Because, and I think we both agree when I say this, if you're a grown adult, and for legal purposes at the moment, that's 18. I mean, there's plenty of scientific studies out there that says your brain does not fully develop, at least in males, till 25. Most females is 22 to 23. But for legal purposes, if you're a grown adult and you want to go sell your body for that, that is your right. The problem now becomes, and that's most libertarians believe. I honestly believe that. Most, I don't want to say left-leaning, most libertarian people, most even liberal people, would look up and go, well, I mean, your body, your choice.
Well, when you have 2 consenting adults, what's the problem?
Well, and there is no problem with that. The problem becomes, how do you define real consent?
Right.
And that becomes, because, and this could dive down another entire rabbit hole, but in certain communities, and like LGBTQ and BDSM and certain communities, swinger communities, etc., porn stars, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
There is consent there.
Right.
Now, the difference between porn stars, like the difference between pornography and actuality of saying hiring somebody on the Vegas Strip, is one is made for entertainment purposes and the other isn't. Yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, pornography.
Yeah.
There's very few places in the entire country that you can actually legally film pornography.
Yeah.
Most pornography is filmed in California.
Right.
And it's actually a certain valley in California. Yeah. Like, it is, I mean, it's very specific to where most pornography is filmed at least in the United States. That is for entertainment purposes.
Okay.
Hiring a hooker is not.
Bless you.
Thank you.
How is that? What do you mean it's not for entertainment purposes?
Personal pleasure versus entertainment. See?
I'm not sure I would draw a line between the two.
And a lot of people wouldn't.
Okay.
But according to the eyes of the law,
yeah.
One is a motion picture.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because there's a running argument of going, if you hired somebody, and there's 18 USC behind it, but if you hired somebody in the Valley in California for their time,
right,
and you ended up having, or the actual argument is, if you hired somebody for sex in California in the Valley and you recorded it, is it really a crime? Because at that point it's pornography. Now, This goes back to the trafficking definition. Force, fear, or coercion. Because in all honesty, and this is something that nobody actually really wants to talk about, a lot of pornography is trafficked people.
Yeah.
There is if you find pornography that's made outside of the United States, the majority of it, they're not free to leave at any time.
Right.
And that becomes a totally separate issue of going, you and I can't go into Moscow.
Right.
And fix that issue. You and I can't go into Thailand and fix that issue. You and I can't go into Hong Kong and fix that issue. But in the United States, and this is the other side, the most commercial TV revenue happens on one day every year. It is also the same day that the most sex workers are trafficked in the United States. It's the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Because the whole phrase behind it is, you want to go find the most sex trafficked individuals, go to Vegas and New York, and the third answer is always, where's the Super Bowl going to be? Where is the Super Bowl going to be? Because Super Bowl Sunday, Super Bowl weekend, is that the most sex trafficked individuals happen to just have, say the Super Bowl's in Atlanta. The most sex trafficked individuals happen to be in Atlanta on the weekend of the Super Bowl, because the Super Bowl has so much money behind it.
Right.
The people that show up that can afford to go to the Super Bowl can also afford to buy a hooker.
Right. You got all that wealth in one place at one time.
It's concentrated wealth.
Right.
And I've said this a lot, and it's, for the most part, if you understand how poor I actually am, is a joke. What's the only color in the entire world that matters? Green. The other side of that is, though, what do most sex traffickers understand too? What's the one thing they care about? Green. Money.
Right.
Period. And they have a reusable product. And not only do they have a reusable product, they have a reusable product that is multifaceted. Because this is where this is going to get graphic. It's a fair warning. This is going to be a very, very graphic episode. To where some people will walk in and they want plain Jane sex. Some people are going to walk in and they want, a rough oral sex. Some people are going to walk in and they're paying for anal sex. Some people are going to walk in and they're going to pay for whatever they want. And everybody's fetishes is drastically different across the board. The problem becomes the traffickers or the pimps, and they're known as bottom bitches. The women that run trafficking rings, they're generally like the lieutenants. They're second in command. They're known as bottom bitches. And that's actually a compliment in that world, to be a bottom bitch. But they're going to look at these girls or these boys or whatever. And a lot of people automatically assume sex trafficking is all women, and it's not. There's a vast majority that are males.
Right.
But they're expected, the pimps, the traffickers, the bottom bitches, the control people, are going to look at that person and say, you're being paid to provide a service. This is the service they're paying for. You will do it.
Right.
Or else. Force, fear, or coercion. And this becomes a drastic issue. And what people don't understand is there are auctions, there are places, and everybody lost their ever-loving mind over Wayfair. If you just figured this out due to Wayfair, you haven't paid. You don't. If you're mad about Wayfair, shut up. Just stop, because you haven't been paying attention to how this actually works for years and decades upon decades since the internet was invented. Because I can go name 5 different sites where I can point out minors all day long based off emojis, based off how they write their stuff. I can point out who owns them based off how a paragraph is written inside the ad. I can point out every single thing. And y'all over here losing your shit over Wayfair, like that wasn't very sneaky.
It's not even the tip of the iceberg.
It's not even close. And the problem becomes, how do you get these girls out? You've got to have it on a federal scale. And I think this is part why I'm still a slight federalist, is because a localist, like the localist idea of going, if you're a localist in Clark County, Nevada, Clark County, Nevada is not big enough, and for anybody that doesn't know, Clark County, Nevada is where Las Vegas is. Clark County, Nevada is not big enough to get a trafficking victim out. The state of Nevada is not big enough to get a trafficking victim out.
Right.
You have to drastically change scenery. You have to change location. You have to change geography. You have to change so many things that if you stuck it to a county level or even a state level, you can't get somebody out. Because the other side of it is going, even if you went from Clark County, say if you went to Vegas to Los Angeles, you were talking about an estimated 25 to 35 million people. I'm not sure it's big enough. You might be able to get lost in a crowd, but what happens if a trafficker finds somebody that ran?
Right.
They're either going back to work and back into that world of force, fear, or coercion, or, and this is something people don't understand. A lot of people talk about the runaway theory, and the runaway theory is, generally speaking, young girl runs away from home, finds a charismatic guy. The charismatic guy gets her into trafficking, or manipulates her into using her body for profit for that guy.
Right.
A lot of times, when they break people in, especially girls, when they break girls in, I say especially girls, it's girls and boys. I know I'm more comfortable talking about what I've seen, and I've never directly seen a male trafficking victim firsthand. Does that make sense?
Right.
Like I've seen them 5 years later.
Yeah.
At conferences and get-togethers, etc. But a lot of trafficking victims, first 2 to 3 to 4 weeks that they're in the control of this other person, they're getting raped consistently. It is rapes and beatings and rapes and beatings. And again, graphic warning, but they're raping them in every hole they have available.
Right.
It is not consensual. It is not remotely ethical, moral, legal, whatever. But at the point that they have been beaten and raped so much, they'll say okay. Which is now turns into, how do you reverse that? Because at that point you're talking about bona fide Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
But just like you get jumped into a gang, what most people would generally call a criminal gang, just like you get jumped into that, these girls and these boys get jumped into this world against their will. And I think that's the biggest difference between trafficking and gangs. Most gangs, or all that I know of actually, it's voluntary to join the gang. It's voluntary to join the set. Trafficking victims are not like that. And when normal people, when Karen looks up and she's like, well, they can leave if they want to. No, they can't. Like, their first 3 to 6 weeks into this world, they were raped consistently.
Right.
Like, and I'm not talking about 1 or 2 times a week. I'm talking about 15 to 20 times a day. Where traffickers will bring in their buddies because they have a new product, and they will get raped anywhere from 10 to 15 to 150 times in a day. And they do that for 2 or 3 weeks to the point of tissue tears, muscles tear, lactic acid builds up. the body starts to break down because they have literally been penetrated so many times, boys and girls, men and women, they have been penetrated so many times by other people, whether it's orally or vaginally or anally. They've consistently been penetrated up to 150, 200 times in a day for 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 weeks. That, do you think they're going to run from that? Because in their mind, if they run from that, it's going to be worse if they get caught.
Right.
And we're just talking about the rape aspect of it. We're not talking about the beatings, the food starvation, the sleep deprivation. We're not talking about any of the other psychological aspects of the initial trafficked victim other than the sexual aspect of it.
Right.
Because at some point, a female will no longer be able to produce lubricant naturally. Well, if that happens, the guy comes out, and I've heard this personally from a trafficked victim. She looked up and she's like, I was dry. I couldn't produce anymore. Like, I was starting to rip and tear and bleed, and ended up getting beat for it because it was her fault that she couldn't do it.
Right.
Even though she'd been malnourished, sleep deprivation, etc., etc., etc. She had been through an entire psychological torment. And the only reason she got out is somebody literally set it up 4 to 5 times. And she'd been trafficked to Vegas. She's actually from, I think, Missouri. But somebody had set it up, and eventually the way they did it is they got a hotel. There was a way they did it. Anyway, I don't want to give too much of that story away.
Right.
But they stuck her on a private jet out of Vegas and flew her back to an undisclosed location for 2+ years of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And when she finally told her story, there was a lot of people and a lot of other trafficking victims that came out of the woodwork that told the same story.
Right.
Of going, I was starved, I didn't get to sleep, I didn't get to do this, I didn't get to do that. And they break them, period. They wholeheartedly just break them mentally, physically. Like, they break them mentally, they break them physically, they break them psychologically, emotionally, and they absolutely do it to the point of they have ultimate control. Now, some people call it Stockholm syndrome to an extent, but the other side of that is don't bite the hand that feeds you, and they get stuck in a moment of time where the hand that feeds them is also the hand that has raped them probably 1,000 times. So what do you do with that? How do you reverse that? And we are just talking about the very basics of what happens in sex trafficking. It can get way worse. I've seen pinkies cut off. Like, if somebody calls and they want a rough sex session,
right,
they never get the cream of the crop.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's damaged. They will get
right.
damaged goods that already have the scars, they already have, etc., etc.
Right.
I'm going to say etc. a lot in this episode because I'm trying not to totally divulge into graphic detail.
Right. It's a euphemism.
Yeah, it's a euphemism because the scars and the marks and the things that I have seen on other human bodies, I will live with the rest of my life. And honestly, most of the time, if somebody doesn't cut it and somebody doesn't make it, they'll slit their throat and throw them in the river.
Right.
Or they'll have carbon dioxide poisoning, or they'll drive off a bridge, or they'll be suicidal. Something. And the other thing that people need to understand about traffickers in general is they are not stupid.
Right.
They are highly, highly logistical and highly, highly intelligent people.
You have to be in order to make that work.
Because they have circumvented a process to the point it's insane.
Right.
Now, that being said, if the DEA, if it's a Homeland Security Blue campaign and Homeland Security investigators had 1/10 of the budget that the DEA does, it'd be a totally different story. But this reverts back to there's a lot of people who do not want this to become an issue because, well, boys will be boys and they got money to burn. It's the truth.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very powerful people that buy a lot of sex. There's a lot of very rich people that buy a lot of sex. And they are some of the most manipulative motherfuckers you will ever possibly meet. I have been within 3 feet of one of the biggest human traffickers, at least in the Southwest. And I will tell you this, if you met the guy at a bar, well, okay, let me rephrase that. If you met her at a bar, one of the most charismatic people you'll ever meet. You would never guess it. You'd never think it. You would never remotely be like, that person traffics over 1,000 people a year through this zip code. Now, I will also say this. By doing this episode, I inadvertently put a target on my back because, well, I mean, if they've seen me, they've seen me.
Yeah. I'm
not a cop anymore. I quit raping kids and assholes. Like, quit raping people in general. Like, Christ, I understand sex sells. And I understand that, you know, if you have the anatomy in which you can sell your body, cool. I don't care. But they're raping people on the daily. Like, I guarantee you right now, somewhere in America, there's probably 1,000+ people being raped as I talk. They're getting broke in. They're getting ready. And 6 months from now, they'll probably be dead. And there's not an organization in America made right now to stop it. There's really not. Everybody's going to say, well, there's Homeland Security. Most cops don't know how to properly prosecute trafficking to begin with, and the vagueness in the law is ridiculous. And that's one of those, everybody talks about, well, 22 vets a day commit suicide. And that's an issue. That's a real issue. But I would dare to say, right now, across America, there's 1,000+ people being raped by traffickers, by clients. And this is the other side too. If you include, and I include this, but if you include actual sex traffic workers, then you're an entire different world, because if they're getting paid for it but there's no consent there, then they're getting raped too.
Right.
Because they're going to be told, you go do this. You're going to be told, you will do this. This is the product. This is what you do. And if you don't do it, you will go back to, the muscle. Like, there's a whole infrastructure inside of a trafficking organization that people have no idea about. And it's a whole lot like the mob. There's a muscle that will come in and correct a problem if the problem arises. Or multiple muscles. And this turns into, if you want to say at minimum across America right now of 330 million people, there's at least 1,000 people being broken in. That's not outlandish to say. The other side of that topic becomes, how many sex workers are out there doing what they're doing right now under the fear of force, fear, or coercion that falls into the statute, that falls into the USC, United States Code of what human trafficking is, and they're still doing it. So you could possibly have 10,000 people out there right now. Mm-hmm. But at minimum, you have 1,000 males and females out there aging anywhere from probably 13 to, and we're not even talking about the pedophile topic. We're talking about straight just trafficking.
Yeah.
Open, blatant trafficking. You have anywhere from 11, 12, 13-year-olds to 53 to 50. I mean, it's literally 60-year-olds that are being trafficked right now and being broken in, being raped, and being molested and being sexually assaulted by multiple people up to 1,000 times a day. And there's give or take, there's 1,000 of them that I'm talking. There's 1,000 of them going on right now as I talk about. They're being sleep deprived. They're being starved. They're having hunger issues. They're probably being doped up on drugs. A lot of them get doped up on drugs, and then their only source to that addiction becomes their trafficker. So you've got a moment of time of, as I'm speaking, there's probably 1,000 people in the country right now being raped and being molested and being sexually assaulted, being beaten, being starved, having sleep deprivation, having their psyche not just broken, but permanently disordered. To the point of never returning to normal again. They could, and I've met some trafficking victims that have recovered, and they will openly tell you, at least 3 of them that I know of, I'm never going to be that normal again. Like, I've gotten as close as I'm going to get to it, and I get a little closer every day, but I'm never going to get back to who I was. Because I've had 15,000 sexual partners. And that was over the course of 2 years. Like, the one I know personally that I sat down and I bought her dinner and I was like, I just want to hear your story. And it was after a conference, and she was one of the speakers at the conference. And I literally walked up and I'm like, hey, this is going to be weird. Can I buy you dinner just to hear your story? And I talked to that girl for 5 hours. And I learned the ins and outs. And then I went and applied it. But I've learned something. The law is supposed to be blind. The law is more evidently blind to this. The law doesn't see this. Well, it's just a pimp running some hookers. Well, and those hookers don't know any English, but they can fluently speak Russian. You might want to dig into that.
Right.
And a lot of times it doesn't get dug into. And this becomes an issue. You've been quiet for 43 minutes.
Well, I can't believe that nobody is actually doing anything about this. I mean,
there's some people, and there's some dedicated people inside certain law enforcement communities that are trying.
Right. But the budgets they've been given,
the funding's not there.
Yeah, it's a joke.
And it's one of those, you text the group, it was me or another group we're in, when Donald Trump allocated, 40 million more?
I think it was 47 million.
47 million more to human trafficking. And I said, I'll give a shit when that says billion.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to stop this. Nobody in power cares.
Yeah.
Because they're participating.
Yeah.
They buy a lot of sex. They do, man. Tell me, tell me I'm lying.
Well,
I would love for you to call me a liar right now and it be true.
Well, based on what we've seen in the past, 2 years, obviously that is true for a lot of them.
Now, how do you stop this? I want your opinion more than anything. Because there was never going to be a definite way on how to stop this. But what's your opinion? How do you stop it?
Well,
your entire world just looks rocked right now. I think I honestly believe it's hard to rattle you and you're rattled.
Okay.
Train of thought, Lucas. Train of thought.
as far as stopping it, like wholly and completely stopping human trafficking, I mean, you're not going to be able to. You can cut into it a little bit.
I think you can cut into it a lot.
Maybe. But the easiest way for me to address that is you, one at a time, I guess. I mean, you have to address this individually.
Yeah, you do.
I mean...
But there's no organization in the entire country doing that.
I mean, there are organizations that are dedicated to human trafficking, but...
They're dedicated to fundraising.
Yeah.
I'm so... Like, and if somebody out there can find one, tell me one. Because there, honestly, is a lot of organizations out there that are like, we're here for trafficking victims. And I can think of one in the entire country that is worth a shit.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. What are they actually doing? Because I don't know.
The Demand Project is doing something.
Okay.
Like, those guys... I'm not going to go into detail about what they do, but...
Right. Well,
they're doing stuff.
I have to wonder, all the others that you see out there online that are fundraising, what are they actually doing? Like, what are they actually producing?
Well, there becomes a moral conundrum with this, too, because... I mean, if I could tell you the entire story about how the person I had the conversation, or the person I had the privilege of having the conversation with that was a trafficking victim and how she got out.
Mm-hmm. Well, you briefly, I mean, you didn't give any detail, but you briefly kind of talked about it, and it sounds messy.
It is messy. Trafficking is very messy.
Which makes sense because this is a filthy industry.
It's an awful industry. But it is wholeheartedly the biggest underground industry in the world.
Right.
It's bigger than narcotics. It's bigger than guns. It's bigger. You will hands down, 100%, always the biggest industry in the entire world will always be sex.
Yeah.
Which means this will top terrorists trying to get nukes. This will top the addict trying to get their fix. This will top everything all the time, every day, no matter what. The funny part is, one of the only group that I honestly believe is doing jack about human trafficking is an hour and a half from here. The Demand Project's based an hour and a half east of us.
Right.
And they're doing something. I will give them that. They're doing something. They're trying. They're busting their ass. They're getting it. But it's messy.
Mm.
And they are creating a place for victims to go to.
Right. Because getting them out isn't enough. I mean, you can't just get them out and dump them.
But that's the problem.
Anywhere.
The problem actually becomes right now, there's nobody getting them out.
Right.
If somebody could go get them out, they have places to go.
Right.
But how do you get them out is a whole nother diatribe. Because getting them out's messy. And the person I had the privilege of talking to that had lived the life, getting her out was messy.
Right.
And it took about 3 months. So this is not an easy topic to talk about because 13-year-old gets in a fight with her parents, runs away from home. And the person I talked to actually I think was 16 when she ran away from home. And was from the East Coast. Ran away from home, found a charismatic guy, got broke in. And at that point was too scared to leave. Ended up in Vegas like 2.5 years later. Like she got out before she was 19. Yeah. Yeah.
So she got lucky.
Super lucky. Super lucky. But she was also in the formative years of her life.
Yeah.
And never had a high school diploma, never had a senior prom.
They took everything from her.
They took everything from her. They took her childhood from her. And she literally said the entire reason I ran away is because her and her mom got an argument over her wardrobe. and she ended up trafficked and didn't see her mom again for the next 4 years. Now, there's my 50-minute breakdown the best I can based off of what I feel comfortable telling people. Because I could do 3 hours on this.
Mm-hmm.
And with the permission of certain people, I will. And if we ever, one day, if it was a rainbow, we'll get her the mic. And I actually have a trafficking victim that has said she'll come on. And we're going to drive, and that's not going to be an hour-long episode. That is going to be, we might actually have to split that into 3 parts, have 2 hours each. But the second we get another mic and get the proper tech to do it, I will reach out to her and we will drive over there on a Saturday or Sunday or something like that. But that turns into, and that's the other thing too. I could probably get 5 of them lined up right now without even thinking about it. There's an entire reason. And I've thought about this. I've legitimately thought about doing the trafficking victim series. Of going, we're going to start interviewing victim to victim to victim to victim. The problem becomes with that, we're going to have to go to multiple states. And we're going to take all of this for, 4 to 5 hour interview. Right. If you want to know the victims, I'll find you the victims. I know them personally.
Right.
And I'll get in the plane with you. And if I can set it up logistically, if we ever have the money, and I can set up logistically, we will do a trafficking series, and I can guarantee you at least 5 parts. Granted, I'm not going to do anything that's going to jeopardize certain safety.
Right. Yes.
I'm not going to jeopardize safety.
Right.
We're going to come up with fake names, fake addresses, whatever.
Right.
Run VPNs through Europe.
Yeah.
I know how to, there's a way to do it.
Yeah.
But, no, and the day we have the technology, and actually that would be one of those podcasts where there is no video.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's going to be one of those audio only kind of deals.
Yeah.
But no, the day we have the tech, it's not if, it's when, hopefully. I had never heard you this quiet in my entire life.
Sorry. Not a whole lot to say.
Say something. You're the co-host. You're supposed to say something.
Co-host.
I'm the co-host too.
No, you are the host.
Okay. On that note, I would like you to describe what heat is.
Heat. Not the scientific term.
No.
Human exploitation and
Trafficking.
Yeah.
Did you file the paperwork?
No, not yet. I'm still looking over things to make sure that we got it going all right.
Okay. Well, in the near future, explain this on a legal level so I don't fuck it up.
Well, how deep of an explanation you want? Non-profit. That's...
Give them the synopsis. We are making a non-profit.
That's kind of what I just said.
To do what, Lucas?
To tackle the problem of human exploitation and trafficking.
So about 5 years ago, I came up with a 300-page proposal, and I took it to at least 5 different county sheriffs, a couple administrators of state task forces, and 2 different federal liaisons. And it was called the it was the blueprint for the Heat Task Force. It was because everybody called, it used to be everybody called cops the Heat.
Mm-hmm.
So I took that and I made a blueprint, and it was called the Heat Task Force. It was the Human Exploitation and Trafficking Task Force. And nobody wanted to touch it. Part of it because the budget was asinine, and it would take an asinine budget. And Lucas, a couple months ago, a month and a half ago, approached me with an idea. And we are now making a nonprofit, and it's going to be called HEAT. And it was literally going to be Human Exploitation and Trafficking. And we're going to go get people out. And we're going to have an infrastructure and a database built up for trafficking victims to go to. We are going to have a way to support them, and we're going to funnel them back to, funnel is probably a bad word in the trafficking world, but we're going to funnel them back to mental, emotional, psychological, medical personnel that are going to be in certain places where they can get healed and they can have healing. It is not going to be religiously based. It is not going to be fundamentally based. It is the only fundamental to it is going to be the fact that if you are a victim of labor trafficking or sex trafficking in the United States and you want out, we will get you there. We have no idea where this money is going to come from. No idea. Because what I said the other day, it's going to cost around a year.
Per year?
Yeah. $2.5 million?
Yeah.
Like, we have no idea where we're going to get this money. Absolutely no idea. But we are going to set up an infrastructure and a logistical pathway for victims of human trafficking to get out. And we are also going to be actively involved in the exit plans of trafficking victims. Because I took this to multiple different agencies at multiple different levels and multiple different jurisdictions. I took this to the law on every single level, from local to county to state to federal, and nobody wanted to listen. So we're going to do it without them. Do I know how? Do I know all the details yet? No. I do know all the details. I'm going to tell you all of it? No. Because there's going to be a lot of secrets in this. There's going to be, because this is a messy industry. It's a messy way to do things, and it is. It's messy on a good day and disastrous on a bad one. Because there have been times, my wife can attest to this, that I have walked in from work and I have grabbed the strongest proof liquor I could possibly find. I have downed a shot or two, and she goes, "Are you okay?" And I say, "Nope," and that's all that gets said, and I go to bed. There was a couple years like that, because the things I saw on a nightly basis wrecked my. Like I part of the reason I'm glad I'm no longer doing it is because now I'm a father, and it wrecked me then. I can't imagine what it would do to me now. So, soon in the near future, and as much as I just talk shit on people that fundraise and don't do anything, we're going to go fundraise, and we are going. I almost want to call it Heat Inc., but legalities, I don't know what it's going to be titled yet. I just know Heat is going to be the beginning of it, the Human Exploitation and Trafficking Resource. Heat Rescue. There you go. It's going to be called Heat Rescue. human exploitation and trafficking rescue. And our entire purpose and our entire goal is to do the things that everybody else keeps failing to do. Look, it's not hard to do it. Is it messy? Yes. Is it a gray area? Yes. Is it hard? No. You get into the steps, you follow the process. And you gotta have the balls to commit to it. Because it ain't pretty. It ain't clean, it ain't neat, it's not nice and tidy, and it's not like a malicious injury to property case. It's not going to be one of those, oh, here is your conviction wrapped up on a silver bowl. Ta-da! It's not that. Trafficking is messy. Trafficking is ugly. Trafficking, especially sex trafficking, is a nightmare. There's a way to rescue people. And for multiple trafficking victims that I've had the privilege of speaking to over the years, I know the way to do it. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy. That doesn't mean it's going to be clean. That doesn't mean it's going to be something we talk about on this podcast. But we're going to do it, and we're going to take people out of the grasp of traffickers day after day after day until the day we die. And if they want to come at us, come at us. Because if I die trying to rescue a sex trafficking victim, YOLO. At that point, till Valhalla. Anything you'd like to add?
Nope. I think that's pretty. I think that's enough for now.
This will not be the last episode that we do on this issue, because this issue, like, Lucas and I will disagree a lot. We will argue, we will debate, we will fight, and we will curse, and we will get technical about technical because constitutionality versus Articles of Confederation. We will fight and bullshit and argue all day long. We will even argue about shit we don't believe in just to make the other person argue. But this is something we agree on. This is something that we will never waver on. This is something that we're not going to stop on. This is something that we will do till Valhalla. Because this is the kind of thing that earns your place there. Protecting innocence, saving those who need to be saved, versus trying to protect those who don't need protected. And the law is out there every day of the week trying to protect you and keep you safe and taking your money and saying this is the reason we're doing it. The people that need saved and protected are the people we're going to go protect and save. We are going to live by the ethos of protect and serve versus punish and enslave. And I think there's a dividing line in what we're going to do in the future versus what American law enforcement and the legal system has become. We are going to go protect and save and serve the most vulnerable people in the entire world. The people who have been broken and beaten and battered and have become victims of sex and labor trafficking. And I will do it till the day I die. Well, no, and there will be days when we'll be tired. There's going to be days when we'll be exhausted. There will be days that I want to just quit. But I won't, because the pain I've seen in their eyes will always supersede the pain I have inside me. And every single time I see those eyes of a sex trafficking victim, it leaves a mark on your soul. And that is either where terror and trauma or inspiration comes from. And very easily both at the same time. So, coming soon to a neighborhood near you, the heat rescue. Lucas, give your single social media account because you get banned from everything else.
I'm on Twitter. At the Lucas Cole.
Oh, there you go. He buffered. Sorry, Microsoft.
Buffering.
You can follow me on just about any social media platform. Look at Greg J. Ingle, Jerry G. J. I. N. J. Lee. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Insta. I'm on Facebook. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Snapchat. I'm on LinkedIn. Like, pick a social media, and I'm probably on it. Also, like, follow, subscribe. The podcast is a Facebook page and a LinkedIn page, actually. Facebook's at the Qualified Immunity Podcast. LinkedIn is at Qualified Immunity Media. And we're on about, just like social media, we're on about anywhere you can find a podcast, we're on it. We're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Anchor, Overcast. There's 9 more, at least 9 more. If you listen to a podcast on any different server, whatever app you use to get to that podcast, we're on it. So, like, subscribe, go leave a review. It helps a lot. It's a massive pusher on how we change the world through this podcast. And if you have Apple Podcasts and you have Spotify, go leave a review on both. It'd be great. It would greatly help us out. Anyway, I'm going to end this the same way we always end this, with Lucas's ridiculous tagline.
Oh. Vote gold. Vote bold. JoJo 2020.
There it is. And the way I live every day, or at least strive to. Live today, love tomorrow, unite forever. Till Valhalla, guys.